people who tell me which ideas are bad. One of the things I've been doing a lot of lately is working on the adventure path, doing work on the Shattered Star adventure path, which we will talk about presently.
I'm Wes Schneider. I'm the editor-in-chief for Paizo Publishing. For the last 4 or 5 years, I've handled all of the back matter and everything that's not the adventure in Pathfinder Adventure Path. And I'm now handling, I've got my hands in a little bit of everything there on the publishing side. But taking up for me, on the back matter is...
I'm Adam Daigle. I got what Wes had handed over to me, so pretty much I do everything that's not the adventure.
Which is what I do. I'm Rob McCrary. I'm a developer also. I pretty much do the adventures when James isn't doing them for the APs. So Skull and Shackles is all my fault if you have any problems with that. Or if you love it, that's also a good thing.
We'll line up the functions.
So, how do you guys want to hold this?
Oh, I guess, how many people here have played in adventure paths? Yeah.
None of you guys? Come on.
So we can dispense with that. This is what an adventure path is. We used to have to do that once upon a time, but I think that's pretty exciting. Now we're going to have to worry about that. Has anybody here not known what an adventure path is? We won't make fun. All right. Oh, so basically, it's just a bunch of adventures strung together to start at first level, go to as high level as you can get. Usually we get to about 15 level or thereabouts in our adventure paths. Have we shipped all of the Skull and Shackles yet? Or
Yes.
No, we haven't. We still have one more left.
One more of those. So that's the one that we're just finishing off right now. That's Pirates. So you want to be a pirate. And of course, we told people last year, don't play a paladin in this one because you're going to have the evil, chaotic pirate. And immediately there's all these threads about, wow, I'm going to do it anyway. Here's how. It's like that's actually
great.
Kind of what we were challenging you guys to do, is to prove that you could do paladins in an evil campaign, which you can, obviously. It's just hard, and you need a GM that isn't a jerk, or it's not 100% a jerk. Sorry. And then
Rob's running this, by the way.
Rob is
James is one of his players. There's the backstory.
Yeah, he almost killed my character a couple times.
But I didn't.
Huh?
I didn't kill your character.
I didn't kill her. Yeah. You just knocked her out.
I killed 2 other people, but not you.
Yeah, okay. There will be funny. There will also be spoilers for adventure paths in here, so that's another thing that I apologize in advance. We'll try to minimize the spoilers that happen, but we will tell you that Karzu is a Rune Lord. We will tell you certain things like that. So
that was Skull and Shackles.
Yeah.
But what we're on to now is
the Shattered Star adventure path, which is, so to back up a little bit more, we try to get every adventure path has some sort of little hook. Like Carrying Ground, that's the one where it's the horror adventure path. Jade Regent, that's the one with the Asian influences in it. Skull and Shackles is pirates. With the Shattered Star adventure path, which we are launching in Gen Con in a month. The idea there is that since this is the 5th anniversary of the Paizo adventure path and the 10th anniversary of Paizo, we decided we wanted to do something that was kind of looking back at how it all began. So this is the first time we're really doing a full-on sequel to an adventure path. Shattered Star Adventure Path is a sequel not only to Rise of the Rune Lords, but also a sequel to Curse of the Crimson Throne and a sequel to Second Darkness. And one of the things that's really, really kind of fun about that is we've never really done that before. We've been really tried hard to make our adventure paths all be timed in kind of their own little world canon. Like each one exists apart from the other. You can play them in any order, and it doesn't really matter who ends up winning in Curse of the Crimson Throne if you want to be Rune Lords later, or it doesn't matter what size kingdom you make a Kingmaker if you want to go play Legacy and Fire, because they don't really touch each other. With the Shattered Star, we are deliberately we're advancing the timeline from to the modern day of Golarion. And we're treating Second Darkness, Curse of the Crimson Throne, and Rise of the Rune Lords as having happened. So that is world-established events. We're assuming the player characters who played this adventure path won, because we don't want to do anything crazy, that crazy. But this lets us do some really interesting things in that, for example, how many people here played Curse of the Crimson Throne? So you know about the Grey Mages. The Great Maidens is this society of, they're really kind of hard-case soldiers invented during the course of this adventure path. They didn't exist before. And so since they didn't exist before, we can't really do much with them, which is kind of frustrating because we put them on the back, we put one on the back of our core rulebook, so we really like them. So with this one, this gave us a chance to have some Great Maidens show up. Wes wrote an awesome article about the Great Maidens in the second of Shattered Star. The adventure itself is basically, we also wanted to go back to just the root of what gaming is, and that is like the dungeon artifact quest. And a lot of our adventure paths, there's a big evil or something bad is coming up, and you got to stop it. Be it a Rune Lord Rising or Eagle Queen or the end of the world or whatever. With Shattered Star, that doesn't really take a role at all. The idea here is that you find at the start of the first adventure, you find a segment of this magical artifact called the Sihedron, which is that 7-pointed star you see showing up all over the place. Right there. And those 7 parts of the star are broken apart into 7 different fragments that are scattered all throughout Mauricia. And the plot of the adventure path is basically go find these 7 parts, and they're all in giant dungeons. So it's really a back to the classics type adventure path where you're not really out there to save the world. You're not really out there to like defeat the bad guy. You're out there to loot dungeons and to get these artifacts and build them up together. We're having it be really part of Pathfinder Society as well, the in-world Pathfinder Society, where assuming your characters are members of this group. Again, they're huge dungeons. We've had a lot of people asking for a mega dungeon adventure path. We've had a fair amount of people say, never, never, never. So this one kind of splits the difference. It's not one huge dungeon. It's 6 huge dungeons that are spread out throughout. It's because with 6 huge different dungeons, we can get a new location every single time, and then we can start them out with you going to these new dungeons. And
there's a sense of completion to it.
Yeah.
It's not you're not always leaving the dungeon, you're not always headed back down the same hole.
Right.
You have a dungeon,
and
you go through and complete it, and then you move on to something else.
Right, you got to finish the dungeon 6 times instead of once in this adventure.
And just to say that it's 6 dungeons, they are not like 6 holes in the earth. Go down into the earth 6 times.
So a little bit of spoilers here. The dungeons there's an Irishman in Magmar. It's a giant bridge, and the big dungeon there is it's inside one of these huge bridge pilings. So it's kind of a tower type thing you can delve down into. And the second one, the Curse of the Lady's Light, the dungeon is inside of this huge kind of Statue of Liberty type thing where you're going underneath it and climbing up into it. The third one takes place in Kiramaga, which is really, it's one of the weirdest cities we've done. It's written by James Sutter, the guy that invented Kiramaga, and it's the only way I was able to ever. I've been trying to get him to write an adventure since the first adventure pack practically. It took 64, 63 volumes, but I got to do it. And that one is basically kind of the city itself is sort of the dungeon. The fourth one goes to Winsong Abbey, which is kind of a more classic dungeon underneath a monastery. The fifth one is in an old tower. It's got a lot of planar stuff going on with playing, and the Darklands and stuff like that are involved in there. And then I don't think we've really said much about the sixth one yet.
Not yet.
It might be on the internet, it's on the Facebook, on the proc site. But so anyone care if I spoil?
Does anyone not want spoilers?
So this one, the dungeon in that one is the city of Zin, which is the first city that was built in Dassalon. And it kind of it rises up from the ocean, and there's all sorts of, I think I see the person who wrote it.
Yeah, he's right up there.
And so that one, the final dungeon is basically the entire city, whereas Kiramaga is a city that is a thriving modern city with dungeons beneath it. Zin is kind of this old ruined dungeon city itself. So, and there's some crazy stuff in there that I can't wait to check out.
Horror.
Yeah, it's yeah.
So I mean, despite the fact that it is 6 dungeons, even just from that, it's not like, all right, a lich tomb, a lich, a lich, a lich, 6 times. I think we got it right here.
Yeah, and each one of them is also tied to these shards, which are all tied to the different types of magic and different sins that this magic is tied to. So like the first dungeon has, I don't want to get too much into it, but like the second dungeon, for example, is the shard of lust. So there's a lot of, it's associated with the rune lord Sortion and how this kind of empire's got a lot of enchantment type effects and stuff like that in the dungeon. So there's a lot of different things to these dungeons. They're pretty exciting. So that's that adventure path. We're doing a bunch of back matter stuff, you know, the same old, a bunch of new monsters. Adam has actually worked some minor miracles in bringing this new technology called organization. I'm not really sure, I'm kind of frightened by it, but it works, seems to work pretty well. We've got some back matter articles that are like, what we've got coming up.
Adam, do you want to tell us like the top 3 most exciting articles you got coming up?
I really liked your Grey Maidens article. Yeah, see? Oh, it's right there. And it started off with an article talking about the Sanhedrin, and also it touches on the 7 sky metals and gives stats and details on those, which people have been asking for a long time. We've got an article that provides extra little side quests, more or less, within the city of Megamar, which more or less acts like a home base. And so it's 3 little short encounters that you can just drop in if you need to give a little extra experience or change it up a little bit. Trying to visualize my spreadsheet.
We got a
Oh,
that's the one that I'm the most excited about.
Yes, and we have a Gazetteer of Lane that's written by Greg Vaughn, and he turned over a really cool map.
Yeah.
And it kind of touches on little bits about Lane, and it's
I'm actually excited about that one because when we did Wake of the Watcher, Watch was like, do a bunch of monsters. So I did all these really great monsters.
Okay.
And he cut 3 of them.
So Wake of the Watcher and Carrion Crown, which Carrion Crown is kind of my baby because it's all Gothic horror. But Wake of the Watcher is very much our Cthulhu, Lovecraft mythos one. And we did an extra big bestiary. And then James also did a super awesome article on the Cthulhu mythos and Lovecraft elements in Galarian. So awesome, in fact, that it far exceeded the word count. We've also done a wide variety of monsters for an expanded bestiary for that. So when you've got too much of one thing and too much of the other thing, something had to give, which meant that 3 of James's monsters that
He's a monster too.
which were designed for that one had to go somewhere else, and that somewhere else ever since has been the back burner.
Well, except for James, which was every adventure.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can we put this in this adventure?
Yeah, just it's
No.
like,
How about this adventure?
This is the one where they finally get CN Shock. Can we put a bunch of Lovecraftian monsters in there? No.
But finally.
But
Yeah.
finally,
They're going to show up.
those are
Yes,
coming back.
the Night Gaunt, the Flying Polyp, and the Bull for duels.
Yeah. Not having the Night Gaunt in there was one of the hardest choices in Carrion Crown, but now it's coming up, so that's cool. Yeah. I mean, it's up before that.
Yeah.
Move your line.
All right. So,
What else do we have about?
Yeah. Anything else?
Yes. What's that? 7 people? Oh, yeah. Forgot about that. Sorry. Yes, and then we have an article briefly talking about each of the Rune Lords that Ron McCreary is writing.
A little more information on them other than their name and their weapon.
And then we'll have Sean Scott's articles as
Yeah.
well. And this time around, he's covering which ones?
Well, Torad finally found its home that it needed, and that's going to be in number 62.
It's Lasala, I think. Right?
Yes, and we're doing Lasala in 65.
We've normally done those articles in every second and every 5th volume. With Torag, we've finally finished the core 20 deities. We're going to still do these, but we're going to be picking deities that are more in tune with the adventure itself. And we're not necessarily going to put them in the 2nd and the 5th one. We're going to put them where they make more sense.
Yeah.
So I guess
So that's what we got for the Shattered Star event path. Is there anything else you guys want to cover on that?
You want to say anything about rumors? The new rumors?
Oh, I guess we could say
Probably
something.
say Ray Wars.
Rise of the Rune Lords, we just went on sale today. Revised the anniversary edition revises the entire first adventure path of Pathfinder. There's a bunch of new stuff in it. How many people here have played through Rise of the Rune Lords before? So there's some new stuff in there. There's not a lot of new stuff, so it's going to be, if you play it again, it'll have a lot of repetition. But when you get to the new parts, it'll surprise you. For those of you who never had a chance, you're the ones we're hoping to get a chance to read this and to play it, because it's really the one that launched the Pathfinder Adventure Path line. It's something that a lot of people will talk about. It's got the most traffic on our message boards. It's a pretty popular one. It's got some crazy stuff. And if we got all 6 of the authors and the cover artist and the photographer are here at PaizoCon all the days. So
one thing towards that, tomorrow we're having a seminar on the Rise of the Rune Lords Adventure Path. We'll have all of the authors, we'll have Wayne here, a few other folks to talk about Rise of the Rune Lords. That's a 2-hour-long seminar, but the second hour of that is blocked off pretty much for signing and whatnot. So if you picked up Rise of the Rune Lords here at the convention, definitely swing by for either the whole seminar, or if you've got a game, come in for the second part of the seminar. We'll have everyone here. You can get everybody's signature all in. And if you haven't checked out Rise of the Rune Lords yet, the anniversary edition is really meant to be the definitive version of this. When we put it out the first time, it was kind of, by the skin of our teeth. And a lot of awesome stuff in there, but we hadn't played the entire thing yet. We didn't take years and years, gilding the lily, so on and so forth. Now this thing has been out there for 5 years. Thousands of players have touched it. Tens of thousands of message board posts have gone on about it. The discussion has just gone on literally for years now. So all of that's been put together into this ultimate edition of it. And you can check that out here at the show, and you can also see, if you haven't yet, the ridiculously just gorgeous collector's edition.
Collector's edition of it it's in a leatherish, it's not real leather like that, but no, maybe it is. I don't know.
It's faux leather.
Faux leather.
With the metal casing and a working latch.
That's not leather.
That's the look.
That's the leather. That's got 15 art prints inside it. All of the handouts are like these pull-out things you can pull out of the page. They're inside of the actual pages of the book, and it's neat.
Is there a place where it's on display where people can
I think
see
so.
it?
Vic has been wandering around. He's kind of been the book baby for it.
Okay. So find Vic works, and maybe.
There'll be the guy with hunched over carrying
There's sort of I don't know, a giant crab in your house that you can crush. That is the book.
That's weirdly specific.
Giant crabs.
Maryland.
So,
Yeah.
So,
I think
I think we're on to the next part of this,
Yep.
which we've talked about the adventure path that James is working on. And the way that the adventure paths are being constructed now is every 6 months we're switching. You've probably noticed if you're a Pathfinder Adventure Pass subscriber that maybe your monthly subscription is something less than monthly every now and then, maybe 2 monthly, whatever. We're behind. We've been behind. We're trying to catch up. And part of that is now James is working on 6 adventures out of the year, and Rob is tackling the other 6 adventures out of the year. So we have 2 adventure paths being built concurrently with the hopes of being able to provide everybody who's subscribed a more regular adventure path experience. But what that means,
we've got 2 in a row on time now.
exactly, a whopping 2 have gone to the printer on time.
How many times has that happened?
Well, none, never
This is the
before.
first time we've gotten 2 back-to-back out on time.
So we're all really excited. All of you are just kind of like,
That's your job.
That's their job.
Don't jinx it.
But while James has very much been the lead on everything having to do with Skull and Shackles,
Shattered Scar,
because all of our names have to be alliterative S names. Serpent Skull, Skull and Shackles, Shattered Scar, Rob will be taking the lead on something new.
So, as you may know, we kind of use our real-world date as sort of a guideline of where Galarian is. So it's 2012 now, and in Galarian it is, anyone? 4712, which means when the next adventure path after Shattered Star comes will be 4713 on Galarian, where something happens. I don't know how many people are up in their Galarian history, but any ideas for what happens? Baba Yaga, what about Baba Yaga?
Swaps out Queen.
She comes back to Galarian. Every 100 years, Baba Yaga comes and puts a new daughter on the throne of Irison. That's been kind of set up for quite a while now. So 4713 is the time for Baba Yaga to once again return. So in February of 2013, we'll be releasing the Reign of Winter adventure path, which deals all about there's no S's anymore, right? There's two things that are not S's. So winter is going to be kind of a big theme for this adventure path.
Winter is coming.
Before you get, we might as well, and again, there are a certain number of spoilers, so go ahead and tell them what kicks off the events of the adventure path.
Okay. So the first adventure, Pathfinder 67, is called The Snows of Summer, and it's initially set in Taldor, although it's kind of open. You can kind of start anywhere on Galarian, and it starts with a sort of unseasonal winter appearing wherever the PCs are. And there's in the middle of summer or something like that. There's a whole bunch of winter. Something's kind of weird here. It turns out, we want to get the whole backstory, you think? Or? Well, Queen Elvana is Queen of Irison, and her 100 years is up, and unlike her 13 or 13 predecessors, she does not want to give up her power so easily. So she decides to take matters into her own hands, and
I think we want to keep that part necessarily kind of secret, sort of.
Well, that's what I said. Okay, well, so something's happened. Who knows? In any case, someone may or may not be behind this winter, which is sort of spreading over Galarian. And it's up to the PCs to... we don't know.
Okay, well then we'll give it back to Rob. We haven't printed any of these yet, and these are all still in writing. So, despite the fact that Rob has put together an expansive and awesome outline, by the time it goes through our authors, the development, editing, and whatnot, certain details are subject to change. So, despite the fact that we're saying, and this happens, this happens, and this happens, 5-6 months down the line here, when we refine this a little bit and it's been through the ringer a few times, there could be some adjustments. So, no promises here, but this is the outline that we're working off of.
Right. So winter, lots of winter coming, and the PCs kind of need to want to find out what's going on with this winter that's showing up. And by doing so, they travel to Irison. I think we can go for that much, and it soon becomes that there's a much larger problem. And that's what I don't know if we...
Well, we can certainly give away, we're going to say all the titles, because it's like one of the first times also they had all the titles worked out, which is kind of nice too. So, right.
So we had the first adventure, which is the Snows of Summer. Then we move into the second adventure, which is called the Shackled Hut. I'm not sure why we'd be talking about a hut here, but there it is. Really, the whole point of this adventure path is to so it's to let the PCs kind of play around with Baba Yaga's hut a little bit and take it to different places, which allows us to go to some places that we've never been before. Now, we're already in Irison. Keep in mind, we said that there's this winter theme, so any ideas for other winter-related places where the PCs might go? Okay, we got a few ideas. Norm King's pretty close to Irison.
Narnia.
What's that? Crown of the World? We went there in Jade Region, so don't want
Mammoth Lords.
not wrong. Close. All right, just say it. Actually, so the next place they go is to Iobaria. We're going a little farther out of the inner sea region. We've touched on it briefly in Kingmaker. There was an article, but now the PCs are going to get to go to another little wintry place. That one's called Maiden Mother Crone, the adventure in Iowaria. From there,
Things get a little weirder.
things get a little weirder in the fourth adventure called The Frozen Stars.
Because people have wanted to explore other parts of our campaign setting.
So there's a little, how many people here have read Distant Worlds? Oh, lots of people. So there's a planet that has a really long winter as it goes off in places, and that planet would be Triaxis. So the PCs are also going to show up there. And from there, we go into the fifth adventure.
We can give the title to, but I guess it'll probably.
We'll give the title to it. Rasputin Must Die. And from there we go to the sixth adventure called The Witch Queen's Revenge. And we won't go too much farther into that unless we really want to.
We will have some question and answers and coming up soon, and you can ask us questions, and we'll like kind of put our heads together and decide whether or not we want to do it too much. Eric, you get angry. Let's do it.
And that's kind of your brief overview of Reign of Winter.
Coming out February of next year. That's going to take us up through the first part of the year, and that's going to be Rob's Adventure Path. So yeah, we've got a few months. Actually, we've got till next year to wait on that. But that's pretty much what Rob's day job is these days.
The next adventure path after Reign of Winter, we will launching in 2013 at Gen Con, and we are not going to tell you about that one yet. We're going to tell you about that one at Gen Con. So that's a month away.
Grumble.
It's cool though. Another thing too, there's been a lot of people online that have basically figured out that we're doing a Bobby Yaga themed adventure path. There's something to do with that because it's kind of obvious. It's 2013. It's Galarian is 47.
It's obvious if you're really super immersed in our campaign setting.
There are at least 2 people out there who are. They are. But I do want to point out that this is not the Irison Adventure Path. We are putting out People of the North, and we're putting out an Irison campaign setting book. 1.5 adventures of Reign of Winter take place in Irison. And so it's not really the Irison Adventure Path, it's the Baba Yaga Adventure Path.
Because all of them deal with.
All of them deal with winter, they deal with the Baba Yaga's hut.
A lot of Slavic and Russian themes throughout.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. You'll definitely want to prepare to endure elements. Probably won't want to play a character that does a lot of cold damage.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of fire-using sorcerers in
Probably going
here.
to be a lot of fire-using sorcerers, which is kind of weird. I mean, there's also
As players.
yeah, and then we've also got the Winter Witch Prestige class coming in Paths of Prestige. We've got a lot of stuff to support this whole thing. So Rob keeps coming to me, he's like, I've got this NPC that I want to do. It's a witch, and we got all the witches already. Is that okay? I'm like, kind of.
Yeah, lots of witches.
So this is something that we're going to be supporting, like James said, not just with Pathfinder Adventure Path, but as the Adventure Path line really kind of dictates what our other product lines end up doing. We are going to be doing an entire book about Irison. We are going to be doing a player companion that focuses on the Northlands of Galarian called People of the North. There will be a map pack tied into it. There will be flip mats and item cards and whatnot.
I don't think we're doing
Okay. I didn't know.
But yeah, so this is going to be the big thrust of what you see from Pathfinder early next year. So, unless you guys have anything else you want to talk about, we can open this up for questions. Oh, all right. First man.
I know with the Rise of the Ruin Lords anniversary edition, y'all put out the miniature set that goes along with it. Are y'all going to do something like that? Are you thinking about doing something like that?
So we've got a lot of plans for the miniature sets and whatnot. And those sorts of announcements largely we put together in tie with WizKids, who are our partners on that line. So we don't have any new news for the miniatures line here. but definitely hold tight maybe towards the dinner or something that's happening. That might be a place where we're revealing all sorts of crazy new stuff.
One thing real quick with the Rise of the Rune Lords set is that was relatively easy, well not easy, but still really hard, but it was in one level to generate miniatures for that because we had a 5-year-old adventure craft that was done.
And illustrations of all of these characters.
Doing the same thing for adventure paths that don't yet have illustrations and might not have illustrations for a year is really tricky. It's difficult, and it kind of there's a lot of stunts for him. But yeah, go if you will be dropping more miniatures.
We do have a pawn set that's coming out for Skull and Shackles. So that it's not the plastic minis, it's the pawns like in the beginner box. And that's going to use a lot of art from the Skull and Shackles AP. So that's at least, we've announced that's coming out. And
so we're going to have 2 ways with the miniatures and pawns.
Miniatures and pawns.
Yeah. All right, who else has questions? Gentleman back there.
I have noticed, and I'm sure lots of other people do, that you really like Brisbane. Counting the Saturn Star, there are 5 adventure paths, I think, that take place in Boulder Park in the nation. So could you kind of tell us about your attachment to that region and what you find interesting and motivating about it?
One of the things to start off with is that when we started doing Pathfinder Adventure Path, Pathfinder Adventure Path predated the Pathfinder Gazetteer by 9 months. Like, we did not have a world when we started putting together Pathfinder Adventure Path. So what we ended up doing was creating Varissia. Now, Varissia is largely based upon ideas from James's personal campaign. A lot of the names you'll see came from James's home and just stuff that James and I put together kind of on the fly because we needed a setting for these adventure paths. Very early on, we knew that we wanted to do something that felt evocative of a lot of the early Dungeons & Dragons adventures, like the various Against the Giants adventures. That's why you see Fortress of the Stone Giants. Just so we're building off that same sort of old school experience that so many of us really enjoyed growing up. So we wanted to make sure that we had a place that presented all of that. So you'll see from the very first one, you've got Sandpoint. That is like your, maybe not idealized or idyllic, but small town that you want to defend and you want to protect. And from there, growing up into a region where you've got very classic fantasy monsters, goblins, giants, so on and so forth. Attic whisperers, yeah, you know, it's like it's the old days. But it's a place that gives us a good variety, so we can run a number of different types of adventures there. Exactly what you said about how we've been able to get so many adventure paths out of Varissia really speaks towards exactly what we were trying to create with this region. A place where we could tell just a dozen different sorts of stories that we wanted. We have a lot of lands, like Assyrian, for example. Assyrian is our country that's very much themed around, fantasy Egypt. Well, if we're going to have a adventure path in our fantasy Egypt analog, it's going to have pyramids, it's going to have mummies, it's going to have these tropes here. With Varissia, we wanted to have a place that just had 1,000 different things that we wanted to explore from kind of the tradition of the game and from what we really wanted to do. So that's part of it is because there is so much to do there. Part of it is because we are personally attached to it because that was kind of our baby and really built to be the host of at least the first several adventure paths. And additionally, now that it has served as the basis for so many adventure paths, there's a lot of interest there. There's a lot of nostalgia there. Folks want to know more about the Rune Lords. Folks want to know more about the Grey Maidens, or the Shoanti, or the Varissians. And those elements that were really created to be just one set piece in the country, or in the continent, have really expanded out into having threads throughout the rest of the campaign setting, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's also, one of the things that you mentioned at the start is, again, the campaign world, Valerian, wasn't published for 9 months. So that meant our first adventure path, Rise of the Rune Lords, didn't have a campaign world. And that meant when we started on the second one, it didn't have a campaign voice. So we pretty much got locked in that first year of doing stuff with what we knew, and that was Borussia, the big portion, the tiny corner of the NRC region that we built for this section. I kind of get a little bit defensive when people say you set 5 adventure paths in Borussia, because really, Rise of the Rune Lords is hands down a Borussia adventure path. It goes all over Borussia. Curse of the Crimson Throne actually stays pretty much in Corvosa, so it's stuck there, and then it goes out to Belton, which is not Borussia. So that one it's certainly a Borussia adventure path, but it doesn't really spread around all the place. Shattered Second Darkness, of course, leaves Borussia by the third adventure. It's done there. So, and then of course Jade Region almost starts there. So
yeah, it's just like immediately out.
Shattered Star is really the first adventure path that you're going to see elements like Karamaga are showing up in there. It's the first time we really are going into the mush fence significantly. So there's going to be a lot of stuff there. Anything else, it's just a big place that was built to accommodate a lot of stuff.
Geographically, it's pretty big.
It is. It's quite big. And of course, with this being the 5th anniversary, we actually have nostalgia now. When we started, we didn't have any, so we had to kind of make it up as we go. Now we have somewhere to go back to. So
one of the biggest things that was in short supply, especially in those early days when we were just doing it, just doing the adventure map, was just proper nouns. Like, this guy's from
the Shea Citadels.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at the first, the first player's guide to Rise of the Rune Lords, while James was doing a lot of the initial work on the first adventure, I was writing the player's guide for Rise of the Rune Lords, and having to talk about like where knights come from, where fighters come from, where wizards come from. We didn't have a world at that point, so it was like, and wizards come from. So you'll see stuff in there where it's like paladins. Some paladins worship Abadar, and James and I came up with the majority of the deities with help from Eric Mona and James Walton and a number of others. But you would get to sections where it'd be like, and sometimes there's mean ones, and those paladins are called Hell Knights. That's kind of cool. So Borussia was really our first place to be like, okay, let's actually put some things on a map and start referencing that, and it's grown.
There's a few of those proper nouns we still haven't followed up on them. My favorite one is the Juggerloath, which is something that you threw in there. Forget that.
There's a lot of like, and here's a noun. Really?
Oh, there we go. Right
What in Armville area is really the most oddball spot that you guys don't really like to touch on?
Well, so that's a tricky question there in that everybody at Paizo has a place that they love the best, and conversely, we have places we don't really like. There are a couple of places that are oddball parks. The two that immediately come to my mind are the Mana Wastes and Numeria. Those are two locations that I love. I love both of those locations because they're so weird, they're so cool. The problem is with the Mana Wastes, there's guns there. And for the longest time, we didn't have rules for guns, so we couldn't really do anything with the Mana Wastes. Now we have the Gunslinger, we've got Ultimate Combat, we've got rules for guns in there, so now that's not necessarily an issue. Another, of course, with Numeria, it has robots, it's got lasers, it's got atom bombs buried in the dirt, it's got all who knows. We don't have rules, well, I have rules for those, but sitting in. So, and that's something that we really can't do much with Numeria without, printing an entire other book. A great example would be with Jade Region. I wanted to go to do this over the top of the world, return to Tin Shaw Adventure Path since the very first Bird offering, which is why I put Amico Kaijitsu into that city. I kind of seeded that Jade Region Adventure Path from the start, and I wanted to do that as the third Adventure Path, but it was like, we don't have rules for samurai and ninjas. Well, we do, but we don't have. We didn't even have game. And so it's like rules for samurais and ninjas and honor and all of this stuff, which is why you see all of these different elements showing up in Ultimate Combat. You see them showing up in Inner Sea, the Dragon Empire's Gazetteer, and novels and stuff that all help bring this to a head. It's a huge undertaking to do something that is not just a dungeon crawl type adventure path. So, as for regions that we don't actually like,
Don't like is an awfully strong word.
yeah, there's certain areas that I'm tired of. I guess I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Andoran. I mean, see, I say that.
That's 4th of July.
I know. That's the past, yeah. So there are certain regions that they just people. I mean, Andoran is just, to me, it's not that there's nothing going on there. There's obviously a lot going on there. We set so many adventures and stuff there. People love it. It's just, for whatever reason, it's never really a place that I've been all that interested in. So,
Like many GMs, James likes the bad guys more.
I don't like the Vegas.
So, Rob, what about you?
In terms of not liking things?
Yeah, well, liking it. What's your favorite? What's your least favorite?
My favorite changes, because currently it's the Shackles, because I just spend a lot of time there, metaphorically, and so I really like the Shackles, although I also like the Land of the Northern Kings quite a bit. Not liking kind of Thuvia and Rahadum down there are kind of, I don't know, for me. But Osirian's cool because it's ancient Egypt, so I like that.
There's none that I really don't. There's none that I dislike actively. There's stuff that isn't as interesting, but I like the crazier stuff. I like Numeria. And, yeah, I like the weird stuff.
Personally, I'm all about Gustav all the time. I like the Goblin card and whatnot. I mean, you see my name on the cover of Rule of Fear, so duh. I like the Carrying Crown Adventure Path. I put that together. Jim Mom actually had to do the heavy lifting, so. As for don't like, I'm all about the places. I feel like I can find something interesting in almost any place that we've done. So I guess that means the places that I'm least interested in are the places that we've kind of done the least with. But at the same, so I think those are some of your places that have the most potential, because they're in many ways blank slates. I mean, there's really not any part of our campaign setting at this point that's totally blank, but they've had the least investigation, so really have some of the most potential. Other questions?
Hat.
Are you have any plans to take the adventure pass to level 20 and beyond?
So we used to do that all the time in the magazine days when we had 12 parts to play with, and we were using a game rule system that was even faster than our fast track. I've always wanted to try to get an adventure path to get it to 20th level because we publish 20th level rules. Two of the tricky things with that is that there's a physical limit to how big we can make the adventures. It's about 50 pages. And that limits how many encounters we can throw in there and all that. So that's kind of tricky.
And by that, he means that 50 pages of work on a developer's desk takes them about a month to do, and sometimes more. So for a monthly project, that's pretty much how much they can handle.
And I tried to get, when the Rise of the Rune Lords revision happened, that actually is on the fast track, because that used the old Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 experience progression. That one you'll probably get up to, you might be able to get 18th level with that Rune Lord build. With Shattered Star is the first one I'm really trying to barrel in and make it go as high as possible. And that kind of means there's not nautical battles, there's not kingdom building, there's not huge overland travel stuff. A lot of it really gets to the dungeons. The dungeons are really, they don't have to spend a lot of time on weird rule systems and stuff like that. And you can full of beanbox or mites.
Chock full of experience.
Yeah, you can just pull that stuff, cram it in there. So Shattered Star #1, you start at first level, you will come out of that into 5th level. And then Shattered Star 2, I've just developed in this optic perimeter. That one you start at 5th level, you'll come out of there at 8th level. So that one is already moving on at quite a clip. I don't think I'm going to be able to get that, and that's using the medium track, by the way. I don't think we're going to be able to hit 20th level with that either. It's not something that we can really do, and it's also kind of tricky in that the game itself kind of goes up to 20th level and more or less stops at 20th level. but that has to work for the GM as well. And so if you've got a bunch of 20th level characters or 19th level characters, the GM and the adventure designers have proportionally fewer tools with which to provide challenges for you, and those tools, they have to make them up, and therefore it takes up a lot more room, and therefore the adventures get a lot shorter. So it's kind of really tricky on getting that type of thing out.
This would be like what Fight 5 Jabberwocks.
Yeah. So, and a lot of them, as Brandon found out writing for, what's it called? The last Shadow Star Adventure Path. If you're doing an adventure and it's like for 16th, 17th level, like 80% of the monsters are as big as this room. And that makes it really difficult to fit them into dungeons. So there's a lot of tricky things. So maybe someday we'll figure something out on how to do a full first to 20th level adventure. We've got some ideas we've been thinking about how to make this happen or do something similar to that. But we'll get there.
Have you thought about following up a previous adventure path with another one that takes it further?
Starting an adventure path not at first level frightens us to the core.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like, another way we would pronounce that is, here's a reason to stop subscribers.
Exactly. I mean, it's one of the, you see it with movies all the time, where it's like, hey, Spider-Man did really well.
Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, as soon as you start telling folks to enjoy this experience, you have to have had this experience. That's giving them a reason not to have this experience. So, we're not super excited about that.
It's also a little weird too because the higher level adventures take up more room because they're more complicated. So even if we start at a 5th level, we probably only get to 18th level. So it's something that we're still fiddling around. They're in the back. Yeah.
The two areas I'm kind of interested in would be the Starstone and the Whirlwind. Do you think those would ever be full adventure paths, or are they more suited to a module?
So
those are big.
Yeah, those are both pretty big ideas. I mean, the Whirlwind one has like demons. Demons are a big deal. The idea of your first level, go fight demons. What? So turns out we know how to make shorter adventure paths. I won't be touching on the Whirlwind anytime soon, but you never know. As for the Starstone, wow, is like one of the biggest topics in our world, and the payoff is you get to be a god. Well, first off, don't have a lot of rules for you get to be a god. So that's a little tricky. Second, it's a huge dungeon. So I mean, we've talked about doing mega dungeons before, and we're kind of dipping our toes into that with Shattered Star with a number of big dungeons. But really, I don't think, at least my impression is that folks who want the mega dungeon experience want the mega dungeon experience. They want the book that is this big, and it's like when you open it, you are first level, and when you close it, you're a bloody god. And we right now don't have a good format for that. I mean, that is not the format of a 32-page module. Right. Or an entire adventure path. Or even some of the 300-page rule books that we do. So it's something we're interested in, but just haven't found a good fit.
As for the Whirlwind, if only there was like a company that published adventure paths that had a creative director that was obsessed with demons, they would have a better chance to have the Whirlwind stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I think somebody asked something similar to this last year, and you guys kind of touched on it and didn't really answer. Basically, have you thought more about like adventure paths that are limiting in a specific way? Like I know kind of maybe with Skull and Shackles, being a press gang and being a pirate. Really, you're a pirate, so that's pretty limiting game-wise. I'm talking about not being a paladin. Something more that's like focused on.
I've always wanted to do an adventure path where everybody in this adventure path is a worshiper of Sierra, and just say that there's everybody in this adventure path is a dwarf or an elf, or everybody is a human, or there's certain limits like that. Skull and Shackles is kind of the first time we really tried that, where everybody we basically say as a pirate. Now you'll note there's no class called pirate. There's an archetype, but that doesn't count. Anybody can be a pirate, even a paladin. as a result, it's not really that limiting. It's just kind of limiting in that theme, but it's still something that we're looking at feedback just now from Skull and Shackles. And until we get a lot more feedback from Skull and Shackles, how people enjoy the fact that you start press ganged onto a ship and all that, we're not really going to know much about it. But it's just, it takes so long to get feedback on it. But it's something we're keeping.
To speak on that real quick, I mean, listen to what we talked about today. We are just getting the first bits of feedback for Skull and Shackles. James is already, we have sent the second Skull and Shackles to the printer. Rob is a Shatterstar. Bloody hell. Thank you.
No S's.
And Rob is assigning all the way through Reign of Winter. So, I mean, the first place that we will have to seriously act on new information from Shatterstar is the adventure path that will be debuting at Gen Con 2013. So the publishing company kind of moves like the Titanic.
But absolutely, one of the best places that we have to hear your voices is not only at conventions like this, but on the message board. If you want to see an adventure path where everybody has to play a note, let us know.
And it turns out there has also definitely been plenty of brainstorms and meetings we've had at the office where that start with conversations like, hey, on this thread on the message board, this many people have said this many people have said this many people have said this. Maybe we should do these.
Yeah. All right, got room for a couple more questions. Over here on the side. Yep, you. The hat. The hat, other hat.
So the question was just asked about, setting the players to be some pirates of Skull and Shackles. I'm not sure if I misheard you when you were talking about Shatterstar. You said, I think, that all the players were going to be Pathfinders. Is that something that is true?
That's sort of one of those limits. I mean, the idea of Shattered Star is we've never done anything in Adventure Path where it's like, you're Pathfinders. We haven't done that before. And that was kind of weirded us out when we sat down and realized it. So yeah, in the Shattered Star Player's Guide, we've got the faction for the Pathfinder Society in there, and it's you're working for Sheila Highmark of Highmark Manor in Magnemar, and the idea is that you are Pathfinders in that adventure.
Is it easy to modify it so that PCs aren't Pathfinders? I don't really use society mind.
Something that's helped us out a lot is we've got a feature called Campaign Traits. So, folks, you have seen traits before, but we've got campaign traits which are specifically like, here's a trait, you get a little bonus, and it gives you a little element of backstory. So it's not just like +2 to whatever, +2 to whatever because
you're a butcher's kid.
You're the butcher's kid. That sort of deal. Put together really nicely. A lot of the campaign traits in this lead you towards, if not being a Pathfinder, at least being Pathfinder friendly.
Yeah. As long as your character is greedy, wants to kick open the door and take the monster's stuff, you'll be doing well.
Which is what Pathfinders and adventurers are. I mean, that's what makes the Pathfinder Society great. Like, the organized play, anybody can play any, almost any character in there. And so it's the same kind of thing. It's, even if you're not an actual member of the Pathfinder, I think you should be able to.
The idea of being like, hey, I'm not a Pathfinder, but I hang out with a group full of Pathfinders, kind of the same difference at that point.
They just have little shiny badges.
They do have badges.
Shiny Pathfinders.
We love them.
So, over the past 5 years, you guys have built these great tools for making these adventure paths and things like these outlines. Is there any chance that we might see maybe a smaller product that says, look, here's the way we suggest you, or here's an idea of how to organize your campaign, and basically kind of lay out the tools that you guys have used so well and present them as a tool for DMs to use in building their own adventure paths?
We published the Game Master Guide, and there's a lot of the stuff in there. Like I wrote the section on how to build a world and geography and all of that. So there's a lot of that stuff in there already.
The other big element is that we kind of can't keep our full mouth shut on the message boards. So, like, most of Carrion Crown's outline is, like, up there. And a lot of the stuff that goes into the adventure paths tend to leak out one way or the other. But as for doing a particular product,
it's an interesting idea. On one hand, it's like we don't really have, we don't have a line that does like meta, here's how to build your game type of stuff. So we don't really have a way to get that out. And on the other hand, there's the weird element of like, we kind of don't want to give away all our secrets. Because it is a business, we are trying to remain competitive, and it's So it's kind of tricky, but I mean, really the best way to do that is to post online. We're always chattery on the message boards and all that. Got one more question. There. Okay.
Do you have any like plans for revealing some of the answers to the mysterious characters in the world, like say whatever happened to Eridan or Nexon Gab or the Black
some of them
Blood
yes,
or
Eridan no.
I mean, I was just wondering if you wrote them like a lot of those. I mean, because there's a lot of like presume nobody knows where he is.
Oh, I
like all these different characters. Do you like to do that just so people can kind of take those as questions in their own?
One of my big theories is that it's okay to keep secrets from the players, don't keep secrets from the GMs, and that even more important is don't keep secrets from the people writing the stuff. So I've got my own kind of idea of what happened to Eridan, but it's not necessarily one that everybody else agrees with.
Here's the deal. The mystery is always more interesting than finally just knowing. I mean,
Darth Vader got pretty uncool.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you found out about the deal behind Darth Vader, who was less interested in Darth Vader?
Oh, spoilers.
What we try to do a lot of the time is every time we answer some mystery or define what something is, we try to set up 2 or 3 different angles from that, or just like, but now this leaves these questions. So we never want to fully define these are the hard-coded specifics of every element of this major mystery. Here's everything. Here's the timeline of what happened to Eridan. For as long as most of us up here are here, we're not going to tell you. We've got our own ideas, and we could probably play it a dozen different ways. But it also leaves it open for other adventures, other GMs to do stuff, a whole campaign, so on and so forth. So the mystery, we feel, has a lot of value. And no matter what we came up with, it's going to be far more underwhelming than what folks could potentially imagine.
But I've been there 4 months, and I haven't even bothered to ask James, even though I could easily just walk into his office and go, so tell me the scoop. And I just haven't bothered. I like the mystery.
But then sometimes we will be pulling the curtain back and revealing a fair amount about mysterious characters, like Bobby Dog, for example. We're over time. We had better get going. We're getting there.